As you take your first breath this morning, a startling realization settles in. Nothing will ever be the same. The air feels different, heavier, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice something you've always ignored. You reach for your phone, almost by instinct, your fingers moving before your mind is even fully awake. The screen glows, a silent beacon in the half-light, and you scroll. News, messages, notifications, 1,000 tiny fragments of other people's lives, all clamoring for your attention. You don't remember deciding to do this. It just happens, as natural as breathing, as automatic as your heartbeat. But today, something is off. Today, you notice the emptiness that follows each swipe, the hollow ache that lingers after every dopamine hit. You sense, for the first time, the invisible chains that bind your mind, the subtle gravity that pulls your focus away from the present moment and scatters it across a digital wasteland. You wonder, when did you last sit in silence, unbothered by the urge to check, to refresh, to escape? When did you last feel truly present, undivided, whole? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your mind is no longer your own, that every thought, every impulse, every fleeting desire is shaped by forces you cannot see, cannot name, cannot resist. Picture yourself opening your eyes to a world where distraction is not a choice, but a compulsion, a reflex so deeply ingrained that you mistake it for freedom. You find yourself standing at the edge of a new reality, the truth dawning on you all at once. You are addicted to distraction, and you never even noticed it happening. There is a paradox here, one that gnaws at the edges of your consciousness. You live in an age of infinite information, endless connection, boundless possibility. Never before has it been so easy to learn, to create, to communicate, to explore. And yet you feel more fragmented, more restless, more lost than ever. The very tools that promise to liberate your mind have become the architects of your captivity. The world is at your fingertips, but your attention is always elsewhere. Why is it that with every advance in technology, every new convenience, every shortcut to pleasure or productivity, you feel less in control of your own mind? Why do you find yourself reaching for your phone in moments of boredom, anxiety, or even joy, seeking solace in the endless scroll, the ceaseless ping of notifications, the fleeting validation of likes and comments? Why does silence feel so unbearable, solitude so threatening, stillness so alien? You tell yourself that you are in control, that you can stop anytime you want. But can you? When was the last time you spent an hour, just 1 hour, without checking a screen, without seeking some new stimulus, some fresh distraction? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be bored, to sit with your own thoughts, to confront the emptiness that lies beneath the noise? There is a contradiction at the heart of your existence, a tension that refuses to be resolved. You crave meaning, depth, connection, yet you settle for novelty, surface, and endless interruption. You long for peace, for clarity, for a sense of purpose, yet you fill every moment with noise, with busyness, with the frantic pursuit of anything that will keep you from facing yourself. You are both the prisoner and the jailer, the addict and the dealer, the seeker and the saboteur. What if the very thing you seek, relief from discomfort, escape from anxiety, a sense of belonging, is the poison that keeps you trapped? What if your addiction to distraction is not a personal failing, but a symptom of something deeper, something woven into the fabric of modern life? What if the world itself is conspiring to keep you distracted, to keep you numb, to keep you from asking the questions that matter most? As you move through your day, notice how often your attention is hijacked by a notification, a headline, a passing thought, a sudden urge to check, to scroll, to consume. Notice how quickly your mind leaps from one thing to the next, never settling, never resting, always searching for the next hit of novelty. Notice the anxiety that creeps in when you try to resist, the discomfort that rises when you are forced to be alone with your own mind. Is this freedom? Is this what it means to be alive in the 21st century? To be constantly stimulated, perpetually distracted, endlessly entertained? Or is it something else, something darker, something more insidious? Have you traded your autonomy for convenience, your depth for speed, your soul for a fleeting sense of connection? You begin to wonder, what is the cost of this addiction? What have you lost in your relentless pursuit of distraction? What parts of yourself have you abandoned? What dreams have you deferred? What truths have you buried beneath the avalanche of information and entertainment? How much of your life has slipped through your fingers while you were busy chasing the next notification, the next update, the next escape? There is a kind of grief here, a mourning for the self you might have been, the life you might have lived, if only you had been able to resist the siren song of distraction. There is a longing for something real, something lasting, something that cannot be found in the endless scroll or the ceaseless ping of your devices. There is a hunger for meaning, for presence, for a sense of wholeness that no amount of stimulation can provide. But there is also fear, a deep, unspoken fear, that if you were to let go of your distractions, if you were to face the silence, the emptiness, the rawness of your own existence, you might not like what you find. You might discover wounds that have never healed, questions that have never been answered, desires that have never been fulfilled. You might be forced to confront the reality of your own mortality, your own insignificance, your own vulnerability. And so you keep scrolling, keep checking, keep running from yourself. You tell yourself that you are just staying informed, just keeping in touch, just passing the time. But deep down, you know that you are hiding from your pain, from your loneliness, from the terrifying freedom of being truly present. What if you could break free? What if you could reclaim your attention, your time, your life? What if you could learn to sit with discomfort, to embrace boredom, to find meaning in the silence? What if you could rediscover the joy of being fully alive, fully awake, fully present? But how? How do you escape a prison you cannot see, a trap you cannot name, an addiction that masquerades as freedom? How do you resist the pull of a world designed to keep you distracted, to keep you consuming, to keep you numb? How do you find your way back to yourself, to your own mind, to your own life? These are the questions that haunt you as you move through your day, as you reach for your phone, as you lose yourself in the endless stream of content and commentary. These are the questions that refuse to be silenced, no matter how many times you try to drown them out with noise and novelty. You sense that there is something at stake here, something precious, something irreplaceable. You sense that your addiction to distraction is not just a personal problem, but a collective crisis, a symptom of a world that has lost its way, a culture that has forgotten what it means to be human. You sense that the answers you seek cannot be found in the next article, the next video, the next notification. They can only be found in the silence, in the stillness, in the willingness to face yourself as you truly are. As the day wears on, you find yourself returning to these questions, unable to shake the feeling that something fundamental has been lost, something that cannot be recovered by simply unplugging or taking a digital detox. You begin to suspect that the roots of your addiction run deeper than you ever imagined, that the forces shaping your attention are older, more powerful, more insidious than you have been led to believe. You wonder, what if distraction is not the disease, but the symptom? What if the real problem lies beneath the surface, hidden from view, shaping your thoughts, your desires, your very sense of self? What if the only way to break free is to confront the darkness within, to face the uncomfortable truths you have spent a lifetime avoiding? As you lie in bed that night, the glow of your phone still lingering in your mind, you realize that you are standing at the edge of a precipice. The choice before you is stark, unavoidable, and deeply unsettling. Continue down the path of distraction or turn and face the unknown. The world will not make this choice for you. No algorithm, no app, no productivity hack can save you from yourself. The question hangs in the air, heavy and unresolved. Are you willing to wake up? Are you willing to see the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, how inconvenient, how terrifying it may be? Are you willing to reclaim your mind, your life, your soul from the grip of distraction? The answer, you sense, will change everything. And so, as the night deepens and the silence grows, you find yourself on the threshold of a new understanding, a realization that will lead you deeper into the heart of the problem, into the hidden forces that shape your mind, your behavior, your very sense of reality. The journey has only just begun. You wake the next morning with a strange heaviness in your chest, as if the questions from the night before have settled into your bones. The world outside your window is unchanged. Cars pass, birds call. The city hums with its usual urgency, but something inside you is different. You feel as though you are seeing everything through a new lens, one that reveals the invisible architecture of your own mind. The urge to reach for your phone is still there, but now it feels exposed, almost absurd, as if you are watching yourself from a distance, a puppet tugged by unseen strings. You begin to wonder, what is this force that pulls you toward distraction, that scatters your attention and fragments your sense of self? Is it merely habit, a quirk of modern life? Or is it something deeper, something woven into the fabric of your psyche? You recall the words of Carl Jung, who spoke of the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves that shape our behavior from the darkness. Could it be that your addiction to distraction is not just a response to external stimuli, but a symptom of something buried within, something you have refused to face? You remember how as a child, you could lose yourself in play, in wonder, in the sheer immediacy of experience. There was no need for constant stimulation, no compulsion to escape the present moment. But somewhere along the way, that innocence was lost, replaced by a restless hunger for novelty, a fear of silence, a terror of being alone with your own thoughts. You wonder, what changed? What wound? What emptiness? What existential ache gave birth to this need for distraction? The philosophers have long warned of the dangers of boredom, of the void that lies beneath the surface of ordinary life. Arthur Schopenhauer called it the misery of existence, the gnawing sense that life stripped of its distractions is little more than a cycle of desire and disappointment. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the abyss, the terrifying freedom that comes from confronting the meaninglessness of existence. Jean-Paul Sartre described the nausea that arises when we are forced to face ourselves without the comforting illusions of routine and distraction. You begin to see that your addiction is not just a personal failing, but a universal condition, a response to the fundamental anxiety of being human. The world is too vast, too uncertain, too indifferent to your hopes and fears. In the face of this cosmic indifference, you reach for anything that will numb the pain, fill the void, silence the questions that threaten to unravel your sense of self. Distraction becomes a shield, a buffer, a way to keep the darkness at bay. But there is another layer, a deeper current that runs beneath the surface of your mind. Viktor Frankl, the survivor of Auschwitz and the author of Man's Search for Meaning, wrote that the greatest human drive is not pleasure, as Freud believed, but meaning. When meaning is absent, when life feels empty or absurd, we become vulnerable to all manner of substitutes: pleasure, power, distraction, addiction. You begin to suspect that your compulsive need for distraction is not just about avoiding pain, but about filling a void where meaning should be. You look around and see a world that is drowning in information but starving for wisdom. Every moment is saturated with content, with noise, with the relentless demand to consume, to react, to perform. The philosopher Aldous Huxley warned of a future not of oppression, but of distraction, a world where people are so inundated with trivialities that they lose the capacity for thought, for reflection, for genuine connection. You realize that this future is not some distant dystopia, it is the reality you inhabit every day. But why is it so hard to resist? Why does your mind crave distraction, even when you know it is making you miserable? The answer, you sense, lies in the architecture of your own brain. Neuroscience tells us that the human mind is wired for novelty, for surprise, for the unpredictable. Each new notification, each fresh piece of information, triggers a surge of dopamine, a chemical reward that reinforces the behavior, making it harder and harder to break free. The algorithms that govern your digital life are designed to exploit this vulnerability, to keep you hooked, to turn your attention into a commodity to be bought and sold. But the problem is older than technology, older than civilization itself. The ancient Greeks spoke of akrasia, the state of acting against one's better judgment, of knowing what is right but doing what is wrong. You see now that distraction is a form of akrasia, a surrender to the lower parts of your nature, a refusal to face the demands of freedom and responsibility. You are not just a victim of external forces, you are complicit in your own captivity. You begin to notice the subtle ways in which distraction shapes your identity, your relationships, your very sense of reality. Every time you reach for your phone in a moment of discomfort, You reinforce the belief that you cannot bear to be alone with yourself. Every time you escape into the endless scroll, you erode your capacity for patience, for focus, for deep engagement. Every time you choose distraction over presence, you become a little less real, a little more ghostly, a little more lost. But there is another paradox here, one that is even more unsettling. The more you seek to escape discomfort, the more uncomfortable you become. The more you chase pleasure, the more elusive it grows. The more you try to fill the void with noise and novelty, the deeper the void becomes. You realize that distraction is not just a response to pain, but a source of pain, a self-perpetuating cycle that feeds on your own avoidance. You think of Sartre's famous dictum, "Man is condemned to be free." Freedom is not a gift, but a burden, a responsibility that most people would rather avoid. Distraction offers a way out, a way to abdicate the terrifying freedom of choosing your own path, of facing the consequences of your own existence. It is easier to be swept along by the current, to surrender your agency to the algorithms, to let your life be shaped by forces outside your control. But at what cost? You sense that something essential is being lost, something that cannot be measured in likes or followers or fleeting moments of pleasure. You sense that your addiction to distraction is eroding your capacity for meaning, for connection, for genuine selfhood. You sense that the price of escape is nothing less than your own soul. You recall Jung's warning that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. You see now that distraction is the most seductive form of avoidance, the most insidious way to flee from the demands of self-knowledge. It is easier to lose yourself in the endless stream of content than to confront the darkness within, to ask the questions that have no easy answers. But the darkness is not your enemy. It is the source of your creativity, your depth, your capacity for transformation. Nietzsche wrote that one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos you fear is the wellspring of your own becoming, the crucible in which your true self is forged. By fleeing from it, you deny yourself the possibility of growth, of meaning, of transcendence. You begin to see that the roots of your addiction are not just psychological, but philosophical. They are bound up with the deepest questions of existence. Who am I? Why am I here? What does it mean to live a good life? Distraction is not just a way to avoid pain. It is a way to avoid the burden of these questions, to escape the responsibility of creating your own meaning in a world that offers none. But the escape is an illusion. No matter how fast you run, no matter how many distractions you pile between yourself and the void, the questions remain. They haunt you in the quiet moments, in the spaces between distractions, in the silence that follows every dopamine hit. They are the price of consciousness, the inescapable condition of being human. You realize now that your addiction to distraction is not a problem to be solved, but a symptom to be understood. It is a signal, a message from the depths of your own being, a call to return to yourself, to reclaim your attention, your agency, your soul. The path will not be easy. It will require courage, discipline, and a willingness to face the darkness within. But it is the only path that leads to freedom, to meaning, to the possibility of becoming fully alive. As you sit with these realizations, you feel a new tension rising, a sense that the problem is even deeper, even more pervasive than you imagined. You begin to see the ways in which distraction shapes not just your own life, but the life of society as a whole. You sense that the consequences of this addiction are not just personal, but collective, that the fate of the world itself may hang in the balance. The questions grow heavier, more urgent, more impossible to ignore. What happens to a society that is addicted to distraction? What becomes of a culture that has lost the capacity for attention, for reflection, for meaning? What is the cost of a world that chooses escape over engagement, novelty over depth, noise over silence? You sense that the answers are waiting for you, just beyond the horizon of your awareness. The journey is far from over. The next step will take you deeper still, into the unseen consequences of your addiction, into the hidden forces that shape not just your mind, but the world you inhabit. And so you prepare to descend, to face the truth that lies beneath the surface, to confront the reality that has been hidden in plain sight all along. The darkness beckons, and you have no choice but to follow. You move through your day, but now the world feels altered. as if a veil has been lifted, and you can see the machinery behind the spectacle. Every moment of distraction, every flicker of your attention, is no longer invisible. You notice the way your mind flinches from silence, the way your hand drifts toward your phone in moments of uncertainty, the way your thoughts scatter like startled birds at the slightest provocation. You are no longer just a participant in this drama. You are a witness, and the act of witnessing changes everything. You begin to see the consequences of distraction everywhere, woven into the fabric of your life and the lives of those around you. It is there in the half-finished conversations, the glazed eyes at dinner tables, the restless shifting in meetings, the constant background hum of anxiety that never quite dissipates. It is there in the way people walk down the street, heads bowed to glowing screens, bodies present but minds elsewhere. It is there in the way you struggle to remember what you just read, what you just said, what you just felt. But the consequences are not just personal. They are collective, systemic, cultural. You start to notice how distraction shapes the very structure of society, how it seeps into institutions, relationships, and the stories we tell ourselves about what matters. You see it in the news cycle, where outrage and novelty are prized above truth and understanding. You see it in politics, where spectacle replaces substance, where attention is the currency of power, and those who can command it wield disproportionate influence. You see it in education, where the ability to focus, to think deeply, to sustain attention over time is eroded by 1,000 competing demands. You realize that distraction is not just a private vice but a public crisis, a force that undermines the foundations of democracy, of community, of meaning itself. You remember the words of Aldous Huxley, who warned that the real danger was not that we would be oppressed, but that we would be amused to death, lulled into passivity by an endless stream of trivialities. You see now that this prophecy has come to pass, that the world is drowning in information but starving for wisdom, that the capacity for sustained attention, the very foundation of thought, of empathy, of selfhood, is slipping away. You begin to understand the mechanisms that make this possible. Cognitive biases, those ancient shortcuts of the mind, conspire with technology to keep you hooked. The novelty bias, which rewards you for seeking out new stimuli, makes every notification, every update, every headline feel urgent, important, necessary. The availability heuristic, which tricks you into believing that what is most visible is most true, makes the loudest voices, the most sensational stories, the most outrageous opinions dominate your mental landscape. The confirmation bias, which leads you to seek out information that supports your existing beliefs, creates echo chambers where dissent is drowned out and complexity is flattened into caricature. But the most insidious consequence is the erosion of your own interiority, the slow, silent atrophy of your capacity for self-reflection, for solitude, for depth. You notice how difficult it has become to be alone with your thoughts, to sit in silence without reaching for some external stimulus. You notice how your sense of self is increasingly defined by what you consume, by the opinions you adopt, by the identities you perform for an invisible audience. You notice how your emotions are shaped by the rhythms of the digital world, how anxiety spikes with every notification, how envy flares with every curated image, how outrage becomes a habit, a way of feeling alive in a world that often feels numb. You begin to see that distraction is not just a way of avoiding pain, but a way of avoiding yourself. It is a form of self-abandonment, a refusal to inhabit your own life, a surrender of your own agency. You realize that every moment spent in distraction is a moment lost, a moment that could have been spent in presence, in connection, in the slow, difficult work of becoming who you are. But the consequences do not end with the self. They ripple outward, shaping the world in ways that are subtle but profound. You see it in the rise of polarization, as people retreat into ideological silos, unable or unwilling to engage with complexity or ambiguity. You see it in the decline of empathy, as the constant barrage of information numbs you to the suffering of others, making it easier to turn away, to scroll past, to forget. You see it in the crisis of meaning, as the old stories that once gave life coherence and purpose are drowned out by the noise of 1,000 competing narratives. You realize that distraction is not just a personal failing, but a collective wound, a symptom of a culture that has lost its way, that has traded depth for speed, meaning for novelty. wisdom for information. You see it in the way people talk past each other, in the way public discourse devolves into spectacle, in the way the most important questions are drowned out by the loudest voices. You see it in the way the world feels increasingly fragmented, disconnected, adrift. But there is another consequence, one that is even more unsettling. You begin to sense that distraction is not just a response to the world, but a way of shaping it, a force that creates the very reality it pretends to escape. The more you distract yourself, the more the world becomes a place that demands distraction. The more you flee from discomfort, the more discomfort grows. The more you seek novelty, the more the world becomes a place of endless novelty, of perpetual dissatisfaction, of chronic restlessness. You realize that you are caught in a feedback loop, a self-reinforcing cycle that feeds on your own avoidance. The world becomes what you pay attention to, and as your attention is scattered, so too is your reality. You see now that the true cost of distraction is not just the loss of time, or focus, or productivity, but the loss of reality itself, the slow, silent dissolution of the world into fragments, into noise, into nothing. You begin to feel the urgency of escape, not just for yourself, but for the world. You sense that something precious is slipping away, something that cannot be recovered once it is lost. You sense that the capacity for attention, for presence, for meaning, is the foundation of everything that matters, of love, of creativity, of community, of democracy, of the very possibility of a life well lived. But the trap is cunning, and its bars are invisible. You notice how every attempt to escape is co-opted, commodified, turned into another form of distraction. Mindfulness becomes an app, a way to optimize productivity rather than a path to self-knowledge. Solitude becomes a luxury, a privilege reserved for the few. Even rebellion is packaged and sold, turned into a brand, a hashtag, a fleeting moment of outrage that changes nothing. You begin to see that the only way out is through a journey into the heart of the darkness, a willingness to face the discomfort, the emptiness, the pain that lies beneath the surface. You realize that the true enemy is not distraction itself, but the fear that drives it, the fear of being alone, of being insignificant, of being mortal. You see now that the only way to reclaim your life is to confront this fear, to embrace the silence, to rediscover the depth and richness of your own interiority. But the path is not easy, and the stakes are high. You sense that the world is at a tipping point, that the forces of distraction are growing stronger, more pervasive, more insidious. You see it in the rise of artificial intelligence, in the proliferation of screens, in the relentless acceleration of life. You see it in the way children are raised, in the way relationships are formed, in the way meaning is constructed and destroyed. You realize that the battle for attention is the battle for reality itself, a struggle to reclaim the possibility of meaning, of connection, of selfhood, in a world that is constantly trying to pull you apart. You sense that the future depends on your ability to resist, to reclaim your agency, to become the author of your own life. But how? How do you break free from a trap that is everywhere and nowhere, that is woven into the very fabric of your mind and the world? How do you reclaim your attention, your presence, your reality, in a world that is designed to keep you distracted, to keep you numb, to keep you asleep? The questions grow more urgent, more insistent, more impossible to ignore. You sense that the answer is close, just beyond the horizon of your awareness, a breakthrough waiting to happen, a realization that will change everything. You stand at the edge of this realization, trembling with anticipation and fear. The world is waiting, the future is unwritten, and the choice is yours. Will you continue down the path of distraction, or will you find the courage to break free, to reclaim your life, to become fully alive? The next step is clear, but it will require everything you have: the willingness to rebel, to challenge the forces that shape your mind, to become the author of your own story. The time for escape is over. The time for rebellion has begun. You wake with a sense of urgency, as if the world itself is whispering that something must change. The old patterns tug at you. Reach for the phone, check the news, fill the silence, but today you hesitate. There is a flicker of rebellion in your chest, a quiet refusal to surrender your mind so easily. You sense that the time for passive observation has ended, The time for action, for revolt, for reclaiming your life has arrived. But what does rebellion look like in a world where the enemy is invisible, where the prison is built from your own habits, your own fears, your own desires? How do you fight a war against yourself, against the parts of you that crave distraction, that fear silence, that long for escape? The answer, you realize, is not to wage war at all, but to change the terms of engagement, to shift your perspective so radically that the old compulsions lose their power. You remember the words of Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of the concentration camps and emerged with a simple, devastating insight. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You realize that the first act of rebellion is to reclaim this freedom, to assert your right to choose where you place your attention, to become the author of your own experience. You begin with small acts of defiance. You leave your phone in another room while you eat breakfast, feeling the discomfort rise and then subside. You walk outside without headphones, letting the sounds of the world wash over you, noticing the way your mind resists the absence of stimulation. You sit in silence for 5 minutes, watching your thoughts flicker and fade, refusing to run from the boredom, the anxiety, the emptiness. Each act is a declaration. I am not a slave to my impulses. I am not a puppet of my environment. I am here. I am awake. I am free. But the rebellion is not just about abstaining from distraction. It is about cultivating a new way of being, a new relationship to yourself and the world. You realize that the antidote to distraction is not mere discipline, but presence. A radical commitment to inhabiting each moment fully, to engaging with reality as it is without flinching or fleeing. You remember the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, "The present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it." You begin to practice this attentiveness, to notice the texture of your experience, the subtle beauty that emerges when you stop running from yourself. You discover that presence is not a passive state, but an act of courage, a willingness to face whatever arises, to sit with discomfort, to embrace uncertainty. You realize that the mind's craving for distraction is a form of self-protection, a way of avoiding the vulnerability of being fully alive. But you also see that this vulnerability is the source of all meaning, all connection, all creativity. To be present is to risk being changed, to risk being touched by the world, to risk becoming someone new. You look to history for examples of those who have broken free from the tyranny of distraction, who have reclaimed their attention, and in doing so, changed the world. You think of the Stoics, who trained themselves to focus only on what they could control, to let go of the rest. You think of monks and mystics, who withdrew from the noise of society to cultivate inner silence, to listen for the still, small voice within. You think of artists and scientists, who entered states of deep flow, losing themselves in their work, discovering new worlds within and without. You realize that rebellion is not a solitary act but a communal one, a joining of forces with all those who have chosen presence over distraction, depth over surface, meaning over noise. You begin to seek out others who share your longing for something real, something lasting, something true. You find them in books, in conversations, in moments of shared silence. You discover that the path to freedom is not one you must walk alone. But the rebellion is also deeply personal, a confrontation with your own habits, your own fears, your own stories. You begin to question the narratives that have shaped your relationship to distraction, the belief that you must always be productive, always be entertained, always be connected. You see that these stories are not truths but choices, choices you can unmake, rewrite, transcend. You experiment with new rituals, new ways of structuring your days. You set boundaries around your use of technology, creating spaces of intentional disconnection. You cultivate practices of reflection, journaling, meditation, long walks in nature that allow you to listen to the deeper currents of your own mind. You rediscover the pleasures of slowness, of doing one thing at a time, of giving your full attention to whatever is before you. You notice the changes, subtle at first, then profound. Your mind begins to settle, to quiet, to open. You find yourself able to focus for longer periods, to sink into tasks with a sense of flow and ease. You notice a new clarity, a new spaciousness, a new sense of possibility. You feel more connected to yourself, to others, to the world. You begin to remember what it feels like to be fully alive. But the rebellion is not without its challenges. The world will not make it easy for you to break free. The forces of distraction are powerful, relentless, cunning. You will be tempted again and again to return to the old patterns, to seek comfort in the familiar rhythms of escape. You will face resistance from within and without. You will stumble. You will fall. You will doubt. But you will also rise. Each act of resistance, no matter how small, is a victory, a reclaiming of your own mind, your own life, your own soul. You begin to see that the true measure of freedom is not the absence of temptation, but the willingness to choose, again and again, to return to presence, to return to yourself. You realize that the rebellion is not about perfection, but about persistence, a daily, hourly, moment-to-moment commitment to living with intention, with awareness, with courage. You see that the path is not linear but cyclical, a spiral of forgetting and remembering, of falling asleep and waking up, of losing yourself and finding yourself again. You begin to understand that the ultimate act of rebellion is to reclaim your own attention, to become the master of your own mind. You see that this is not just a personal victory, but a political one, a refusal to let your life be shaped by forces that do not have your best interests at heart. You realize that every moment of presence is an act of resistance, a refusal to be reduced to a consumer, a data point, a cog in the machine. You sense that something is shifting, not just within you, but in the world. You see others waking up, questioning, resisting. You sense the stirrings of a new movement, a new consciousness, a new way of being. You realize that the rebellion is not just about breaking free from distraction, but about reclaiming the possibility of meaning, of connection, of selfhood. You feel a surge of hope, a sense of possibility, a conviction that change is not only possible, but inevitable. You see that the forces of distraction, powerful as they are not invincible. You see that the human spirit, when awakened, is capable of extraordinary things. You realize that the journey you have begun is not just your own, but part of a larger story, a story of awakening, of resistance, of transformation. You stand at the threshold of this new reality, trembling with anticipation and resolve. The world is still noisy, still chaotic, still full of temptations and traps, but you are no longer a passive victim, no longer a sleepwalker lost in the dream of distraction. You are awake, you are alive, you are free. And as you look ahead, you sense that the greatest realization is yet to come, a truth so powerful, so transformative, that it will change everything you thought you knew about yourself, about the world, about what it means to be human. The rebellion has begun. The journey continues. The ultimate truth awaits. You stand at the edge of dawn, the world hushed and trembling, as if holding its breath for what comes next. The rebellion has left you changed, your mind clearer, your senses sharper, your heart more attuned to the subtle music of existence. Yet beneath this newfound presence, a deeper question pulses, insistent and unyielding. What is the ultimate truth that lies beyond distraction, beyond rebellion, beyond even the struggle for freedom itself? You close your eyes and listen. The silence is no longer empty, no longer something to be feared or filled. It is alive, vibrant, humming with possibility. In this silence, you sense the contours of a truth that has always been there, waiting for you to notice. It is not a truth that can be grasped or possessed, but one that must be lived, embodied, surrendered to. You remember the philosophers and mystics who have walked this path before you. You recall Carl Jung's journey into the depths of the psyche, his insistence that wholeness is found not in the conquest of the shadow, but in its integration. You think of Nietzsche's call to embrace the chaos within, to become the artist of your own life. You remember Viktor Frankl's assertion that meaning is not something given, but something created in the crucible of suffering and choice. And then, like a flash of lightning in the darkness, the realization comes. The addiction to distraction is not merely a flaw to be overcome, but a doorway, a threshold that once crossed, reveals the true nature of your existence. Distraction is not the enemy. It is the invitation. It is the call to awaken, to remember, to return to yourself. You see now that the struggle against distraction is the struggle to become fully human. It is the struggle to reclaim your birthright, the capacity for presence, for depth, for meaning. It is the struggle to inhabit your own life, to become the author of your own story, to say yes to the mystery and terror and beauty of being alive. You realize that the ultimate truth is not found in the absence of distraction, but in your relationship to it. Distraction will always be there, always beckoning, always offering escape. The world will always be noisy, chaotic, full of temptations and traps, but you are no longer at the mercy of these forces. You have learned to see them for what they are, invitations to return, again and again, to the only place where life is truly lived, the present moment. You understand now that presence is not a destination, but a practice, a continual act of returning, of remembering, of choosing to be here now in the midst of it all. You see that every moment of distraction is an opportunity to wake up, to notice, to begin again. You realize that the path to freedom is not a straight line, but a spiral, a dance of forgetting and remembering, of losing yourself and finding yourself, of falling asleep and waking up. You feel the weight of this truth settle into your bones, both liberating and humbling. You are not a machine to be optimized, not a problem to be solved, not a project to be perfected. You are a mystery, a process, a becoming. You are both the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought, the wound and the healing. You see now that the addiction to distraction is a symptom of a deeper longing, a longing for connection, for meaning, for wholeness. It is the soul's cry for home, for belonging, for a sense of place in a world that often feels alien and indifferent. You realize that the only way to satisfy this longing is to turn toward it, to listen to it, to honor it as the source of your deepest humanity. You remember the words of Rainer Maria Rilke, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things." You see that distraction is one of these things, a force that defeats you, humbles you, brings you to your knees, and in doing so, opens you to a greater truth. The purpose is not to conquer distraction, but to be transformed by it, to let it break you open, to let it teach you the art of returning, the grace of beginning again. You realize that the ultimate act of rebellion is not to escape the world, but to embrace it, to say yes to the messiness, the uncertainty, the imperfection of your own existence. You see that meaning is not something you find, but something you create, moment by moment, in the choices you make, the attention you give, the love you offer. You feel a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that arises not from the absence of struggle, but from the willingness to engage with it fully. You see that the journey is never finished, that the work of waking up is never done. You understand that every day, every hour, every breath is an opportunity to return, to remember, to reclaim your life. You open your eyes and look around. The world is still the same, full of noise and chaos and distraction, but you are different. You are no longer a passive victim, no longer a sleepwalker lost in the dream of escape. You are awake, you are alive, you are present. You see the people around you, each caught in their own struggle, their own dance with distraction. You feel a surge of compassion, a recognition of your shared humanity. You realize that the work of waking up is not just for yourself, but for the world, for your family, your friends, your community, your culture. You see that every act of presence, every moment of attention, every gesture of love is a gift, a ripple that spreads outward, changing the world in ways you cannot see. You remember the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." You see that your freedom lies not in the circumstances of your life, but in your response to them, in your willingness to choose, to act, to create meaning in the face of uncertainty. You realize that the ultimate truth is not something you possess, but something you live, moment by moment, breath by breath. You feel the enormity of this responsibility, the weight of your own freedom. It is both terrifying and exhilarating, a call to greatness, to courage, to love. You see that the world is waiting for you, that your life is waiting for you, that the only thing standing between you and the fullness of your own existence is your willingness to show up, to be present, to say yes. You stand at the threshold of this new reality, trembling with awe and gratitude. The journey has been long, the struggle fierce, the cost high, but you would not trade it for anything. You see now that the addiction to distraction was never the enemy, but the teacher, the force that brought you to the edge of yourself, that broke you open, that taught you the art of returning. You realize that the ultimate truth is simple, but not easy. Life is lived in the present. Meaning is created in the present. Love is given and received in the present. Everything else is a distraction, a dream, a shadow. You take a deep breath and step forward into the fullness of your own life. The world is waiting. The future is unwritten. The choice is yours. Will you continue to run, to hide, to escape, or will you return, again and again, to the only place where life is truly lived? The answer, you know, will change everything. And so you walk into the day, awake and unafraid, carrying the ultimate truth in your heart, that presence is both the path and the destination, the question and the answer, the wound and the healing. That to be alive is to be present. To be present is to be free, and to be free is to love. The journey is not over. It never is. But you are here, now, and that is enough. You are enough. And as the sun rises, casting its golden light across the world, you realize that nothing will ever be the same.